Welcome to Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. I am delighted to introduce you to my guest, Nagaraj Balasubramanian. Nagaraj is a cell biologist by training and is an associate professor at the Department of Biology at Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. His lab is called a Cell Addition Laboratory and is interested in understanding how the cell matrix environment affects how cells kind of function. He is a scientist who interfaces with society and has a keen and deep sense of aesthetics and love for music. He also has very deep interest in photography, arts, movies, books and philosophy. And Nagaraj is also very active on Twitter and his posts are really worth following. In this particular conversation, we delve deep into his becoming of a biologist, especially in the context of his exposure to the education system which he had over the years while growing up. We talked about the importance of school teachers and how reading widely as a student can shape your thoughts in a very important way. Interestingly, he has a background in microbiology and he later on made a transition to cell biology and went on to do a PhD in a cancer hospital. And he mentions how this has deep impact on his research and his thought process as a researcher too. And we also discussed some very interesting elements of how it is important to be curious, and the importance of stupidity in research is so critical in looking at one's own thoughts and understanding what is happening in one's own research. We also had a very nice discussion on his transition from the US to India and how he started his research on cellular matrix and its connection to some elements of mechano-biology and how a multidisciplinary approach to his science has helped him understand this fascinating problem. As I mentioned, Nagaraj has a deep sense of aesthetics. He also has deep interest in design, and we discuss a bit about that particular aspect. And we go on to further discuss about the elements of research within the Indian ecosystem, the sociological aspects, and importantly, his own research activities and outreach activities, which has played a very deep kind of role in impacting the way we do science. One of the most important aspect is Nagaraj's initiative in terms of the SPICMACE kind of organization, and he quotes a very interesting quotation called "Great nations deserve great art," which is also kind of reflected in his initiatives to bring in very important art into the academic environment. He also narrates a remarkable story on a concert by Vishwamohan Bhatt, which he organized when he was in the US, and he describes how emotions can really be evoked by music and how it has deep impact on people. There's also a very nice and small segment in his mother tongue Tamil where he describes about his research, and he also makes a transition from Tamil to Hindi where he recites a beautiful poem which is absolutely worth listening to. We also conclude this particular podcast with a kind of a discussion on interdisciplinary approach to science and how he is trying to take this approach to look at his own research problem and some of his future directions in the context of outreach activities which he is pursuing. I thoroughly enjoyed this long conversation with Nagaraj, and over the years I've also found him very engaging speaker and an excellent colleague to discuss not only things related to science, but many things beyond science. In that sense, he truly kind of manifests a scientist who is willing to humanize science. And I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion I had with him during this particular conversation. And I'm sure you will also have it. Listen to Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. Hi Nagaraj, welcome to Pratidwani, where we try to humanize science. And
thank you. Thanks, Pawan, for having me.
Great. So Nagaraj, it's a pleasure to have you here. And tell us a little bit about your background in terms of your education and your making of the biologist, so to speak.
That's a very broad stroke. No, I think so. I'll try and pick up on the major things that probably are of consequence here. So I grew up in Bombay. I was not born in Bombay. So I was born in Ceylon, Sri Lanka.
Wow. Okay.
So my mother is from Sri Lanka. So
Wonderful.
She grew up there. So I was born there. But my parents lived in Bombay. So that's where I grew up. And my memory of Ceylon is very, very limited. But Bombay is what is home. I think introduction to sciences was, there are a couple of distinct points I remember where this became relevant or became interesting for me to say that, okay, this is something that you may be interested in doing further. I don't think I was a very good student to begin with. I was very average at best.
They make the best scientists.
No, maybe. Yeah, so I think you don't have to be exceptionally smart to maybe do this. It helps, but this is one of the things I realize, and I tell my students here as well that there's a lot of method to doing this as well. Obviously, creativity and just the flair for doing it is one. But in the classical sense, you don't have to be an academic topper to do
absolutely
science, right?
Absolutely.
And, so I think for till about 8th grade, I was a very average student, and I think in 8th grade, I remember failing an Hindi examination and being promoted to the next standard from 7 to 8. And I think 8th was a very defining year for me, simply because of a bunch of teachers who started teaching me at that point of time. And there were 3 or 4 who, it just happened that they were all teaching from that particular standard, and they all had a very strong influence on how I just in general felt about studies or learning.
Okay.
And I think there was exceptional teacher who taught Hindi called Mrs. Thakur, I remember, and who is singularly responsible for my interest in Hindi literature or poetry as it is now. There was somebody who taught geography, Sabrina, teacher, who I remember making geography just incredibly exciting to understand and think about.
Yes.
There was a teacher who taught English, who essentially encouraged me to go do things like elocution. I remember in 8th standard, for some reason, she picked me to participate in an elocution in school, even though I had never done anything like this.
Like that, okay.
And she worked every day with me at the end of the day. Now, when I think about it...
For the listeners, can you just explain what is elocution?
So elocution is where you are essentially going up on stage and essentially speaking about something. It's not extempore, it's practiced. But the idea is to be able to, like theatre, go up and remember a very long verse.
Absolutely.
And be able to recite it, extempore. Right?
I can see where it is coming. Because,
so this was quite remarkable, because I think I never thought I had the capability to do something like this, and let alone do this in front of an entire school. And she worked with me. I remember she lived very close to the bus station that I used to take the bus back home from. And in the evenings, I would go spend an hour at her home. And she would coach me.
Wow. Okay.
And I still don't know what made her do this. But we picked something that I'm going to speak, and then she worked with me on this.
On that particular thing. Okay.
And the speech we chose was Charlie Chaplin's speech in The Great Dictator.
Wow.
Right?
That actually is...
It is quite remarkable.
Quite remarkable, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, and for about a month, maybe she did this with me. And then you had to go speak in front of the school on this day. And it's interesting, our school in Bombay was affiliated to a seminary. Remarkably, there is a seminary in Bombay.
Wow, okay.
And it's in Goregaon, and this seminary was associated with my school. So all our events used to happen in the seminary.
In the seminary.
The seminary. So this is like a fairly, maybe 100 acres of land in Bombay, which is quite remarkable. It's very green. Yeah, it's very green, and it's like these small buildings that are in that big giant campus.
Yes.
And they had access to things like a basketball court and a stadium and a theater almost.
Wow. Okay.
And that's the reason we ended up having our school events there.
Nice.
So I remember going and speaking this speech from The Great Dictator. And,
wonderful.
And I won the elocution on that year, which I think was a life-changing event because one, it made you realize that you could work towards something and achieve something that seemed nearly impossible to do. And you could do this well if you put your mind to it.
Okay.
So elocution that year was life altering in some sense because it just put belief in me that I could do this and that somebody else believed the same way about it. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there was this English teacher, and then there was a teacher who taught biology by the name Mrs. Pillai. And Mrs. Pillai was just a remarkable teacher, right? That I think she just taught biology in ways that I had not been taught biology before.
Very nice.
And that I think triggered this interest in biology. I think from 8th standard onwards, academically there was, if I go look now at this report card for every year, I think there is this distinct shift in just interest. I don't think this was just about grades.
Okay.
It was more about interest in wanting to learn.
Absolutely.
And this then reflected in grades. And I remember my mom always was, of the opinion that you should at least be in the first 5 in class, and my rank used to be in the 30s or 40s. And in the 10th standard, this last examination we give in school, which is the prelim examination to the board exam. Was the only exam in school that I came 4th in my class.
Wow, okay.
And I remember she was very thrilled that, okay, it took 10 years, but you seem to have managed this. But I think this was largely because of interest that a bunch of teachers generated.
Yes.
And I think just as it got me interested in science, I think it also got me interested in teaching. Because I realized the impact that just bunch of teachers could have because of what they do and how they do this.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
And that's again something that stayed, with time. And part of my interest in teaching now also stems from the fact that, I somehow feel this has the capability to influence.
Absolutely.
At this level.
See, the one of the aspect which you did mention, reasonably in some elaboration, is the influence of teachers, especially at the school level. They have probably one of the highest impacts on any growing child, especially in terms of any topic you would further take great interest in.
No, it is remarkable. I think the impact this can have, and I think we are I think we're very malleable at that level, and the kind of interest, I think just somebody taking interest in you and your capability
absolutely
can change how you believe in yourself.
Absolutely right.
And this, I think, matters at that stage more than
absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you're lucky and you have a teacher, as I said, it wasn't just biology. I mean, I stayed interested in geography. I stayed interested in Hindi literature, even today. And, a lot of the ability to get up on stage and speak I think stems from the fact that you were exposed to this at that point of time.
Absolutely.
So that stayed in many ways.
Wonderful. The aspect which I would want to double click on is the kind of topics one studies in school generally is kind of broad. But you can already see that even as a child develops, she or he would take up interest in a particular topic. So was there anything particular within your schooling which really triggered your interest around 8th standard, as you were mentioning?
So I think the interests were very diverse for me. I think there were a lot of things I was curious about. I think, as I said, Hindi poetry is something that has stayed with me all the way up to this point. Even now,
we will ask you to recite something later on.
No, and all of that started not just because of this teacher, because I think inherently, she made it very cool to be interested in these things.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I think curiosity is always there. Access. For many of us, is still there now with internet and technology. I think people can access information in ways that they couldn't at that point of time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right. Absolutely.
So I think there the exposure was limited.
Yes.
But whatever came your way, you really soaked in everything that you had. Sports I was interested in. I played soccer in school and played at the inter-school level.
Wow. Okay.
And another nice thing was all these sport-related events were used to happen at this seminary. There were summer camps that we attended with Olympians, and I mean, now when I think back, it's quite remarkable that you had that kind of exposure, even though it was a suburb in Bombay, I think. But this also meant all of this stayed. I remember just watching a soccer match, I think in the time where there was no YouTube.
Exactly.
And I remember for these summer camps, they would bring films from the British Council on film, right? And these used to be, they had a projector in the seminary and we used to get to watch. So I remember watching, Argentina and Brazil playing, on this big screen, on film, and this was remarkable because you had like 30 minutes of this, and that's the only glimpse of a Pele or that you have had, and it's stayed.
Amazing.
So I think some of these things, just the exposure, the opportunity to go see and experience things.
Absolutely.
I think kind of ensured that your curiosity stayed alive and kept continuing.
That's probably also one of the beautiful aspects of growing up in Bombay, I suppose, right? Yeah. Because unlike a lot of other places, probably within India and even outside India, Bombay has evolved very interestingly. Of course, I haven't lived there. I've been there a few times. But I felt that, let's say you compare to any other city in India, it has a very different cosmopolitan aspect to it, right?
Yeah. No, I think also the vibe that everybody is there, who is there, can accomplish anything.
Yes, yeah.
I think is a very real thing.
Real thing, right? Yeah, it's literally like an American dream, but in a Indian situation.
I think, it's amazing how people living in Bombay, even today, I think have this belief somewhere in them that anything is possible. And there are, amazing examples of this in the city. So in that sense, that aspect of the city's changed dramatically. I think, it has, I mean, as much as I love the city, I now know it's harder and harder to live in Bombay. I think one thing I've realized is Bombay is one of those cities you can't leave. I think, you cannot live away from the city for 10 years and come back and expect it to feel the same.
Exactly. It's evolving. Literally, it's evolving, right?
So you just have to live there and grow or change with it. And that's the only way it feels like you belong there. So... But I think this was true that in Bombay, even in small schools, I mean, we were a small school in a suburb, we've had all very interesting people who have come from our school. One of our very famous alumni is Sudhesh Bhosle, who's a singer. And he was, few years, 5-6 years senior to me, and we've seen him in school. Now, that's the amazing thing that, I see him even now on television and other things. And the notion that this person began from that place, like in a small school in the suburb. I think, and there are many others, I'm sure, who have done this in other parts of the city as well.
Yeah. So that's kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
So then, going forward, you are now finishing your school, and then you go ahead to do your college in Mumbai, or
So I think the other big influence as far as sciences was concerned for me was the fact that were two things. One, I think my dad is a mathematician by training, though he didn't. He eventually worked in engineering backgrounds and became an industrial engineer, and then worked in the Times of India for many years.
Very interesting.
But his undergraduate degree is in mathematics.
Nice.
And he graduated from St. Joseph's College in Trichy, which is, and from this small town called Srirangam, which is, on the Kaveri, where, as they say, mathematics runs in the water. Runs in the water. So they have this immense sense of pride in what, mathematicians from that part of the country have accomplished.
Absolutely.
And so this sense of access to these ideas or thoughts that, there is a possibility of doing something in the sciences was always there. And I think my father, he had books of works that were done by Ramanujan and Hardy, and it took me a while to understand why he has these books, what they mean, but they were there. They were available. I think, he also had, I still continue this, which is this ability to collect and read stuff.
Absolutely.
No matter, if it's interesting, buy it. Read it.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, I'll come to that because I know you're an avid reader. Yeah. And anybody who follows Nagaraj on Facebook and on Twitter especially knows that he does post a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, so that also became very useful because I don't think at that time you had access to books, beyond what the school library had. He had very simple things, and I find it quite remarkable that he would have these things. One is, I think, Time magazine for about 7 or 8 years he subscribed.
Wow.
And he didn't throw them away. He bound these magazines.
Yes, that used to be a kind of
the thing, right?
Exactly.
And so you had I think summers I spent reading Time magazine, because this was what was available, right?
Wonderful.
And I read American history, because it is American history, right? You're looking at this was the time when Martin Luther King was assassinated, JFK was assassinated,
Nice.
and so you had a front row seat to reading about this.
Wonderful.
So the same was also true about the sciences, that I think there was a lot of content that was available to read. And this meant there was always this thought that, this is very cool. And so the fact that you have it at home suggests that this is interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
He also had, his eldest sister's son was a scientist. And Bala was very influential because he worked at the Radio Astronomy Center in Ooty.
Nice.
I think about a month ago, Bala turned 80, and I was at this celebration in Coimbatore to largely be there. More than anything else, because of the impact he's had on just me thinking it is cool to be a scientist.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
So he lived in Ooty, and they had this very beautiful, bungalow as quarters.
Wow. Okay.
Which is quite remarkable, because here is a old British bungalow with wooden floors and a fireplace. And where do you get to see this? Right? This was like a fairy tale, and we spent summers there. We used to go just to hang out because we had some place to stay.
There.
And I spent a lot of time going to the Radio Astronomy Center, looking at the telescope and just spending time, right?
Nice.
And he was often in Bombay because he used to come to TIFR.
Okay.
And whenever he came to Bombay, he would come and stay with us.
Nice.
So you met this person very regularly, who was exceptionally bright and was a scientist. And seemed very cool, seemed like a very chilled out person.
No air about...
Bala was the first person I knew who was an atheist. And
very nice.
It was, and he made it very cool to be an atheist.
Exactly.
So I told him all this now when I met him for his 80th birthday.
Nice.
Saying, it's remarkable. It's something as simple as that. The fact that you met somebody in this period of your life,
absolutely right,
made a difference,
huge difference.
And he knew other people in the sciences. I think among the first people in biological sciences as a scientist I met was Professor Krishnan at TIFR.
Wow, okay.
Professor Krishnan is Anand's father.
Yes,
right?
yes,
and,
yeah.
So I remember seeing Anand as a small kid. I remember.
Nice.
And I went to see him because he and Bala studied together in the training school in BRC. And so Bala said, go see him. He's a biologist. He will probably tell you what you should consider. And I went to meet Krishnan at TIFR, and TIFR is an intimidating place.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think just being there was chilling, in that sense. And they had these long corridors that, you were very sure you were going to get lost. And I go see Krishnan, and Krishnan says, what is this? Don't do science and all. So I said,
that's amazing.
He said, don't waste your time doing all this. Why are you interested in doing this? And I got a piece of his mind at that point of time. But he spent 45 minutes, an hour talking to me about what he does and why I shouldn't be doing that. but I think this interest or curiosity kind of stayed right?
Yeah.
And so I think some of these people just getting an opportunity to meet them.
Yes.
Even if, I didn't spend time working in a lab, just interacting with some of these people, I think, made a big difference.
Absolutely.
I think this is one of the reasons why even now I feel in places like ISER and other academic institutions. I think the opportunity to go visit a school or talk to students, I don't pass off on at any point of time. Because, in some circumstances, all it is going to take is that chance to meet that one person.
Exactly. It's just once, right? That is the amazing
that can leave
part.
an impression.
Absolutely.
So these two people were instrumental, I think, and then I think after the 10th standard examination, I think I had marks to get into dentistry, but not medicine. That was after the 12th, and I didn't want to do dentistry. I kind of knew I didn't want to, and so that was the point where I think a decision in some sense had to be made, saying, do you want to do a professional course or do you want to kind of try something in the sciences?
Wonderful.
And I think one of the things I realize now is that there was no pressure to choose one or the other. And there was no pressure. I think even now maybe families are fairly open about it, but I think there is a significant pressure from maybe society to say, are you picking the right profession?
Yes.
I don't think that existed then. So you went with the flow. You thought, okay, this looks interesting.
Yes.
And I joined the Department of Microbiology in Bhavan's college, which I think at that point of time, along with St. Xavier's and Bhavan's Microbiology were set up by Professor Dhala, who was one of India's leading microbiologists.
Yes.
And it was considered a very good department to be in, and it was very hard to get into.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that was another thing. And I remember we were 26, 27 students who got into the BSc microbiology program. And that's how this was introduction to biological sciences.
Wonderful.
In that sense.
Wonderful.
And again, there were teachers who just made this a remarkable experience. So that again comes back to being the basis of all your excitement about an area.
This is something I've observed. Maybe you can actually tell me whether that is a kind of a general aspect. I've found that people who have had a background in microbiology have very kind of broad interest in biology. Because this is again an observation purely from an external viewpoint. Because I find that people who have had background in such a kind of studies, especially microbiology, I found also a couple of friends of mine who later on went on to do medicine, still kept very high interest in microbiology. Post MBBS, they actually ended up doing research and left and did not practice, but they became a very big scientist.
So it's interesting. I had not thought about it like this, but one aspect could be it was taught very early on. The St. Xavier's Department of Microbiology, I think, is the oldest in Bombay.
Oldest? Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And other universities like. So I have this anecdote of, people who I later discovered had all graduated in microbiology.
Okay.
There is this very famous singer called Talat Mahmood. Talat Mahmood is a microbiologist.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Okay, I did not know
and
that.
He graduated from Aligarh Muslim University.
Fantastic.
So Aligarh Muslim University, when he was studying, had a microbiology department. So one of the things here is, I think microbiology came much before, biotechnology or DNA biology, if you want to call it that.
Very nice.
Right? And so microbiology was being taught very early on.
Yeah.
So in the early 50s, there were departments across the country that had microbiology being taught.
Very nice.
And that may also reflect in the quality of trained people, right?
Exactly.
Who are teaching the subject.
Precisely right.
And this may have something to do with how well it was taught, and therefore maybe how interest is sustained. Right?
Yes.
So when you're saying students of microbiology stayed interested, it may have to do with the fact that maybe this was taught in ways that made it exciting, interesting enough to stay connected. Right?
There's also a strong visual component to it. And a connection from the visual to the conceptual. Again, this is all kind of cursory. Having also kind of got interested in some aspects of it as a student, mainly from microscopy viewpoint, and because optics is essential in that regime. And I found that there are a lot of people who have made important discoveries and inventions where they had taken keen interest in microbiology, virology also, of course. That is another thing.
I think microscopy could also be an important factor, because I think to be able to observe things, a microscope was accessible on most times for most of us, and just being able to mount some pond water and see everything that's there in it, I think is always still remarkable. I think
Absolutely.
I think things like fold scope now, for example, is doing well, largely because it sparks that you see something in your daily surrounding in ways that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, has a strong influence. I think in microbiology, I remember in one of the practicals, we do this. I mean, there were many interesting things done, but a lot of it was done with resources or reagents that were, commonly available. So I remember we had an experiment to try and isolate, fluorescent bacteria, and this used to happen using fish as a sample, because they were the chances of finding them are higher. So we would collect these samples, and everybody used to process them and then try and plate and see. And every couple of years, we would get a couple of isolates, which were fluorescent. And so now you have this bacterial colony that you take and you streak, and you have these 300 colonies in a dish, and you put them in the dark and they glow.
Wonderful. Spectacular. Huh?
I think it was just like as simple as it was, it still was remarkable to see. Right? That this exists, and you have a way to isolate it. And I remember, so some things like that really made a strong impression. Right?
This is something very critical, because it imprints on you that there are certain ways of looking at the universe, your universe, which is within your kind of purview, so to speak. And this also probably has a very deep kind of connection to what you're reading, what you're studying, and as you mentioned, because the environment at home probably is also very encouraging for you to become a scientist.
Right. And so I think I did my bachelor's in microbiology and then master's in microbiology.
Nice.
And I think at the end of the master's, I kind of knew that this is something I would like to do further.
Nice.
Provided there is an opportunity that presents. I think going abroad was realistically an option. I don't think we had the finances to support it.
So that's the usual thing for many of us.
So it was only possible if you got a scholarship. And I remember applying to a lot of places after my master's, and there were a couple of schools that came back with a fellowship. And I wasn't very interested in the programs that actually gave funding. I think there were interesting things in the process that happened, that I remember applying for this J.N. Tata endowment.
Yes.
J.N. Tata was a big deal.
Yes.
I think now when I think back and I look at the kind of people who have been awarded the Giant Tata Endowment. I think it is remarkable. And so I remember getting selected for the Giant Tata Endowment.
Yes.
I think because I didn't go abroad to do a PhD, I didn't take it up.
Take it up? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't take it.
Okay.
But the nice thing was they host a high tea. At the Bombay House.
Nice.
And the Bombay House is a really remarkable place.
Yeah.
You know, and on the top floor of Bombay House, there is a boardroom. That is the Tata boardroom.
Tata boardroom. Yes, I've heard about it. Yeah.
We got to have high tea with Ratan Tata, which is quite remarkable.
Okay.
So, yeah, but I think the chance to apply definitely came, and I think at some point I had to really make a decision on whether I want to go to some of these schools that were making offers or not. And then the thought was I realized, I think, in this process that I may not be that interested in microbiology as a subject to do a PhD.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do was largely cell biology.
Cell biology, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many of the programs I had applied to were microbiology programs.
Okay.
And that was largely to do with the fact that your degree was in microbiology. So you thought that's what you're going to pursue.
Yeah.
But then I think you slowly develop this interest in cell biology.
Yes.
So then, when it came to applying for PhD here in India, the thought was to apply to programs that had a strong cell biology program, right? So I remember applying to a bunch of places and interviewing at a few of these. And the Tata Memorial Hospital, which was then the Cancer Research Institute, which was in Parel, I think was among the first ones to make an offer.
Wonderful.
And I don't think there was a lot of thought in terms of place and, where it is and what it means in the big scheme of things.
Yes.
I think you thought this was a nice place to work. It's in Bombay. They made an offer and we said, okay, this looks this looks fun. Let's do this.
Absolutely.
So there wasn't. I think now when I think back, there were other places that probably I should have said yes to, but this came by and I think it was the first.
It worked out all right.
It worked out okay. Now when I think about it, so I think so some of this decision making was not very calculated, right? And now when I think about it, I realize a lot of the decisions I think I've made have not been very calculated. It was very instinctive.
Absolutely.
You thought this seems like a fun thing to do. Let's do it and see what happens.
I can relate to that because I too actually had similar experience. Because there is that saying that you understand life backwards and you live it forward in that sense.
That's very true. That's very true. So it was, just being in that vicinity, I think of being in Tata Memorial meant that one, it was affiliated to a hospital.
Hospital, yes. That's actually of paramount importance if you're doing cutting edge biology, right?
Yes. I think it also... I think being in a cancer hospital, I think is a life-changing experience.
I can understand.
I worked on a disease called chronic myelogenous leukemia.
Okay.
And this is a leukemia that was...
So leukemia is blood cancer. Just
blood cancer. Yeah, it's blood cancer. And, we were studying how there is this... kinase called Abel kinase, which is, which forms a very active version of itself in these cancers, which is what is responsible for a lot of the changes that happen in these cells.
Okay.
And we were trying to understand how Abel, which sits with this thing called BCR, breakpoint cluster region it is called.
Okay.
So BCR Abel is this signature for chronic myelogenous leukemia. And how does that able kinase affects cellular behavior is what we were studying in the lab at that point.
Nice.
And being in a cancer hospital and working on leukemias meant that a lot of patients you saw were very young.
Young man.
And and in some strange way, this left a very strong impression at that point. I think, it was till that point, it was a fairly protected, fun existence. I don't think there were quote unquote real hardships.
Absolutely.
Right? And now you saw what a challenge a disease poses. Right. And
absolutely.
And especially for, kids who are
just starting.
Yeah, I mean, they've not experienced anything at all.
Yes.
And the impact it has on families.
Yes.
So this, I think, I very distinctly remember even now when I think about it. Among all the things that I remember about being in Tata, I think this was very prominent.
Prominent, is it?
Yeah, in the sense.
This is something which is very remarkable, what you're saying. The fact that such good hospitals also had a strong PhD component is something which is very heartening to know, right? Because
no, I think there are many places in India which do. I think, and Tata is one. I think St. John's is one.
Yeah, St. John's.
Many with good research programs, and I think there is a lot more integration now than it was 15, 20 years ago. I think Tata was very conducive for this, largely because this ecosystem had been put in place.
Okay.
So I think Professor Khanolkar, who started the Cancer Research Institute and said that there should be a research center associated with the hospital.
Okay.
I think in that sense, that was a fairly progressive thought to have when he did. So this was among the few places that had been set up early on, where there was a strong research capability affiliated with the hospital.
Wonderful.
Right?
Wonderful.
And so it was a very important, I think, experience working in a setup or in a place like that. I think you also met a lot of surgeons. I think the way doctors think about diseases is very different from the way scientists do.
Yes, you're right.
And I think that was another thing that came across very prominently when I was doing my PhD there.
That's wonderful. So in this particular stage of your PhD where you're getting started, you had to undergo coursework, or you had some kind of pre-training?
No, I think coursework was there. I remember we all went through a few months of this before we started. I remember I did not have a fellowship, and I think so I gave a lot of these exams, didn't clear anything, and then the money was coming from the institute. And I think it wasn't a lot of money. I think
then it was like
I think it wasn't a lot, and you were just trying to save whatever you could, but I think somewhere in the second year there is a transition to an SRF thing, and I remember applying for that with CSIR and getting that fellowship at that point. And so I had funding, my own funding for the next.
Taken care of that. That's
after
wonderful.
That,
So what was your process then, Nagaraj? During that time, now you have completed your master's in microbiology. You are now also getting into cell biology, which actually has some connection. But conceptually, there might be very different aspects related to cell biology, which may not have been a preamble kind of in the microbiology studies. So what was your kind of approach to develop slightly more in-depth knowledge in cell biology? Of course, research would have gone further, but you would have also been doing some kind of reading and other things.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about being in CRI at that point of time was we were located in Parel, which had access to all these places around it.
Nice.
There was the Hafkin Institute, which was next door, which had access to probably one of the kind of best libraries in Bombay. At least medical or scientific libraries.
Nice.
There is KEM Hospital, which is not very far away.
Yes. Yeah.
On our right hand side was Wadia Hospital, which is a children's hospital. So this was a real hub in that sense.
So essentially, you're doing your PhD in a hospital, right?
Yes, and you are surrounded by
all these places.
Right?
Wonderful.
And that also meant you had access to many of these places. There were talks happening at KEM or at Hafkin that you were attending. I think the access to read, the libraries that were accessible. The Tata Memorial Hospital had a really good library.
Good library, yeah.
And they also subscribed to a lot of journals, which were medical journals, things like Lancet. You started reading because they were in the hospital, and I think the emphasis was largely reading. Reading. Yeah, I think you read everything you could get your hands on. And clearly there was a lot to know, and you didn't know a lot, but the hope was that there will be people you can go ask, ask them to recommend something that you should read if you want to know more about something, and this also meant that you were slowly, steadily building an understanding of the biology of cells, but also of disease and particularly cancer biology. That
absolutely
that's what I was working on, and this has kind of stayed, even though there have been transitions away from this. I think some of those thought processes, I think, are still reflected in the kind of questions we ask right now.
Wonderful,
right? Yeah,
wonderful.
So, which is actually quite remarkable.
Yeah. In fact, this is a very important point what you mentioned, because see, that is one thing people who have been deeply invested in their studies, especially right at the beginning, where you, as you mentioned, you did not have been a topper in your class, but there is some aspect which is carried over all the way to your research, right from your college. Conceptually, I'm telling here, which actually you can keep asking those questions from a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
And suddenly you will see that your understanding is kind of growing as a function of time.
Yeah.
And you also probably realize that what is the general understanding need not be the complete understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the need to kind of be curious about things, things that you don't completely understand.
Yes.
And then figure out a way to kind of go read and understand them. I think this is at the core of everything we do.
Yes,
and as long as that stays in big and small ways,
absolutely.
Right? I think it ensures that you can pick an area that is completely new sometimes, and learn to do well in it, or ask questions in it if that's what your where your curiosity
lies.
I think that's kind of stayed. So I think that becomes paramount, I think.
Absolutely right.
More than anything
else.
Everything else. Access and other things will keep changing. There will be times where you have access to, resources, information, people. And I think that sometimes is not entirely in your hands.
Exactly.
But this ability to soak in as much as you can, keep asking questions and wanting to know more, I think is probably worth cultivating because it stays.
Absolutely right.
No matter where you are.
Exactly. That is one thing which is going to stay all the while, right from your school days up to any time you are interested in doing research. So in this framework, when one is looking at learning things, especially at a level of PhD, it is important for any person who is doing a PhD. And I'm also talking because on this aspect, because there are many listeners who might not be doing PhD, who might be doing something else. But in depth, some other kind of stuff, whatever it is. So this framework of going deep into some particular topic really plays a very critical role, right? Because of course in PhD, of course you would spend a significant time, but how does one approach going in depth into a particular problem? That is something I'm always curious to ask, and I would love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think so. The process obviously is variable in the sense that the kind of depth to which you want to ask a question, sometimes can be limited by what you can or cannot do.
Yes.
And in that methodology or process, is one aspect of this. And the ability to think through, to go because I think as I see it, conceptually in thought, there should not be a limit on what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that cultivating that, I think, was probably not harder but more important to do. At least when I look at it now, I think there were certain phases in my life where I worked with people who did this really well, who did this well in ways that I did not know was possible.
Yes.
Right?
Nice.
And in some cases did it fairly effortlessly.
Wonderful.
Right?
Wonderful.
Like for them, this was very intuitive, and it was very easy. And I think the trick was to be able to watch them do this. And then ask, how are they able to do it? Right? Because I don't think they had answers for how they were able to do it.
Nice.
So I think one of my postdoc advisors that I worked with was very good. He's still very good at this. And I don't think he's the best teacher around, because he's able to do something really well. I don't think he completely understands how to make somebody else do this as well as he does.
Nice.
Right? So for him, so for me, what was interesting to watch him do this was to understand the process.
This is Martin you're talking about?
Martin, I worked with, for a good period of time, 5 to 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, probably one of the brightest people I have worked with, and is extremely quick, extremely sharp. It was very challenging to kind of just be able to push your thought process to a level where you can have a conversation and be meaningful in it. So for a good part of time was spent you kind of creating a thought process or evaluating a thought process, and then going to him for a conversation. And the first question he asks kind of unravels everything you have thought. Right?
That's the power of questions also, right?
That was scary. That was scary because, you really had given it thought. And so you realize that, why did you not ask that question? Right? And his intent was not to kind of teach you how to ask that question, but his intent was to just ask the question. Right? And now if you figure the relevance of it and you figure how to think with that question,
nice.
Then you do, so it wasn't an easy learning, but it was a very relevant learning in terms of, how to get to the bottom of a question, right? Like how do you plan an experiment in such a way, or a set of experiments that will take you there. Now, and why do you go this way and not that way?
Yes,
I think that actually is a even bigger thing, right?
Absolutely,
because we're all limited by resources, time, all of this.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
How do you choose what you want to work on?
Right? Absolutely right.
And I think this was an important learning which happened rather gradually only, that with time you realize the relevance of that. It's not about asking the most obvious question. It's not about asking the easiest one. What would produce the most important
answer. Absolutely right. Absolutely.
Right? And now we're thinking which will get published, but I think I don't think that was the thought process there. I think the question was like, what will be an exciting question to ask?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, because see, the Peter Mewar, who is a celebrated biologist, also went on to win a Nobel Prize and other things. He talks about the art of the soluble, where you would also have to see the feasibility of addressing a question in a way that is amenable to your resources and also your own interest and other things.
Yeah.
And also Martin Schwartz, by the way, is at University of Virginia, right?
He was at that time when I did my postdoc with him. I think he's since moved to Yale.
Yeah, okay.
And I think he was there for the 6 or 7 years.
7 years, okay. Yeah. Because there is a very famous article which still goes around social media and among researchers, the importance of ignorance. That is a remarkable article.
It is a remarkable article. I think, it was very interesting. There were, so this importance of stupidity in science, I think, is one of the most downloaded articles in the Journal of Cell Science.
Wow, wonderful.
And I think it stemmed from a conversation in a lab meeing where I think what happened was that one of his very good friends, Martin's very good friends, I think quit science. And I think she quit science even though he thought she was very good at what she was doing.
Okay.
And her response to why she was leaving was, she said, I got tired of feeling stupid every day. And his reaction to that was,
what we
yeah, but I feel stupid every day. Like, why would this be so difficult to do?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And that's what led to him bringing this to a lab meeting and saying, how many of you actually feel this way, right? And does it bother you that you are made to look stupid every day by nature or by the kind of questions that you are asking, and how much does this affect you?
Okay,
right? And then I think he decided that the idea that it's important to maybe say this, that it's not being said, that we all feel this way.
Absolutely right.
That we all are feel stupid most of the times. But the interesting bit here is to kind of not let that affect or bother you. And say, okay, this says that this is not how this works. Now, it's taught you something. Let's ask it in a way that you will figure out how it actually works. Right?
This is something very important, because in the process of doing research, the fact that most of the things don't work should actually be a normalized thing. And sometimes the perception, especially with new students who are joining any research program, may not have this understanding.
Yeah, I think it's not something that we are taught to deal with.
Absolutely.
I think, till you come to doing something like this.
Absolutely.
I think to this, along with the ability to fail.
Yes.
And not that like completely unravel you, I think are probably the most important skill sets that you want in your life.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I don't think, life teaches you this in some form or the other, but I don't think we discuss or talk about this in schools or colleges in a way that says, how do you cope with something not working? How do you help that or use that to help you do this better.
Better. Absolutely right.
Right? And I think a few years ago, I went to Israel, and I have a good friend who I did my postdoc with, and Tali lives in Tel Aviv, and she's been asking us to come for a while, and my wife was traveling for some work.
Okay.
So we said, okay, let's make a trip of it and go see them also. And I spent a week, in Israel. And Israel has a very interesting, way of doing this.
Absolutely,
in
right.
some sense, that many, if not all people, have at some point of time tried to start something conceptually, or as a company, or as a startup, right? And almost all of them have failed at something, or failed multiple times trying to do different things.
Yes.
And they have normalized this to a level that it's a bit strange for you to be there and not have actually done something that has failed.
So that's actually, in a way, it's a very effective strategy, right?
It is remarkable. It is remarkable. I think... So Priya and I thought quite a bit about this after we came back, and also during that trip, because it was so obvious in how young people are approaching questions, or approaching things that they want to do, that nobody seems to be apprehensive of failing. At some inherent level, I'm sure there is a certain apprehension. It's like, but I think for the most part, they have normalized, this ability to fail.
That's quite wonderful.
And the question is, how have they done this?
Yes. And they are remarkably successful. If you look at it, they're
successful. See, the thing is that if you have 300,000 people trying to start a startup, 30 will do well.
Exactly.
And I think we are trying this now in the Indian context, in the sense that we are trying to get more people to think about this.
Yes.
And maybe that's one way to do this.
Absolutely.
So Priya was there as part of a delegation, and they, the Israeli government was actually taking a bunch of people here to showcase the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Nice.
And some of what she learned from that trip was that they realized this was important for them to do well as a country. That they don't have the the resources, natural resources to stay viable. And relevant. And right at the beginning, when Ben Gurion started, I think they got together and asked, how do we stay relevant?
Nice.
And they realized, or they at least came up with this thought, that technologically we can be something that other countries will want to kind of work with. Like, we develop the technology in ways that others benefit from it. Then we have a place under the sun. And then this was something that they consciously
did it.
Drove, right? So I think this is integral to the process of doing science.
Absolutely right.
And I genuinely think that the ability to fail is probably the most important thing you will learn.
Absolutely right. No, in fact, otherwise the thought process of getting into research will be kind of muddled otherwise, because if you are expecting everything to work and if it does not, and that really is kind of a dampener for a lot of people. And many times even students who have had very good kind of so-called marks or kind of CGPA in some particular situations may not be geared to really do very good research.
So along with this ability to, to look stupid more often than not, or fail more often than not, I think. So there is another follow-up article to that importance of stupidity.
Yeah. By the way, I'll be kind of giving references to all this at the show notes, so listeners would be able to access it.
So I can't remember the name of this article per se, but it's based on the idea. It's based on the thought that how important it is for you to do your science and then let go of it.
Nice.
That you have an observation or an idea and you develop it, and then it belongs to everybody.
Absolutely right. That's it's kind of open source.
Right. That and I think we all are very attached to the problems that we work on, and I think students feel this very strongly as well. I've had students who, started a research problem and had great hesitation in kind of sharing information, for somebody else to take that forward.
Yes.
Because they felt this belonged to me.
It's like a baby.
And this idea that you could, that you do this and at some point of time it doesn't belong to you.
True.
And this stemmed from this. I don't know if you've seen this, but in Tibetan monks do this. There is something called a mandala painting.
Mandala painting. Yes.
Which is very elaborately done. It's made out of colored sand, which is like rangoli, and then they do this, fairly huge painting, which could take few days, week, maybe longer to create, and it's done very painstakingly. And you finish this painting, and the people who make the painting with their own hands take it down.
Wow.
Right? In the sense that it is sand, so you essentially then collect all the sand.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
And they give you a handful of that sand to remind you that nothing is permanent.
Nice.
Right?
There's a deep philosophy there.
It's a remarkable philosophy. I think I was at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, which had a reasonable number of Tibetans, and they came and did this once in the city square, where so we went to see them do the painting over a week or 8 days, and then they broke it with their own hands, and they give you a handful of that sand.
Nice.
to remind you of this.
Wonderful.
And I think that conversation, so I think with Martin, what led to triggering this thought that we have to learn to let go of, of things that, you work on an idea or a concept, and this is a real challenge. I think as scientists, we really struggle with this.
Absolutely right.
Not just graduate students, I think.
On all levels.
More so, I think,
even at a higher level.
Where you're thinking, nobody can work in this area. Or, and so I think that's another important thing I think I learned over a period of time, that, it's okay. Once you put it out, it belongs to everybody.
Absolutely.
It belongs to everybody,
Wonderful.
So in that sense, it's a very unifying thought. That science has this ability to...
Absolutely.
You learn something, and then now anybody can use it the way, they see it.
Absolutely. There's an element of humility also involved in that. True. Now, circa 2010 or so, you are making a move. You already had this kind of research assistant professor position there. And what made you kind of gravitate towards Mother India?
No, I think the thought of coming back had been around for a while. I think I was part of the reason. So my wife was a graduate student and trying to finish her PhD, and the idea of not applying for a faculty position there was, once she's done, we wanted to explore this possibility of coming back.
Okay.
And I think it happened by chance that the first young investigator meet was happening in Boston.
Yes.
This was the first one that Shiladitya had organized at that point. And there was a friend in New York who saw a poster on their notice board. And I remember him calling me and saying, "Hey, you guys were thinking about going back. There is this thing that's happening.
Nice.
Maybe you should look this up." And I had no clue this was happening.
Nice.
Till he called. And I think this was like a day or two before the deadline for this. And so I applied to this, and they had a session. They invited a bunch of us to Boston to do this. For the meeting, and there was like a closed door session which was very interesting, that there were a lot of people from India who were heads of institutions who had largely come to meet with about 30 of us who were selected, who had expressed an interest in going back. And this 2-day closed door session was where we were presenting what we did. And they were talking about the institutions and what their vision for the places were. This was unheard of before that.
Yeah.
And it really, catalyzed this idea that, that this could be an interesting time to go back.
Absolutely. Right.
And I remember meeting Shashi in that meeting. And I had no clue ICERs existed.
Yeah.
And but what he had to say, I remember, seemed very unique. Right? And
so said, many of them have fallen to Shashi's rug. We are talking about Professor Shashi Zara, who is now the director of NCBS, but he also played a fundamental role in ICER's program. And,
So I remember Shashi saying, "Why don't you come and check us out and see what And so that's how Pune got added to that trip. And I think the thought was, we'll check out places in Bangalore. And I think there was an offer eventually from JNCSR, but I think Pune also, I came to Pune and I remember distinctly thinking this was unlike any of those other places.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the people, I think, is what made it unique.
Absolutely.
So then this became a hard call. Because, and I think, my wife will hold this against me all her life, that, we were very clear we were going to Bangalore, and then I couldn't make up my mind. And I remember at some point, Shashi asking her, why are you not willing to come to Pune? So she said, we're thinking Bangalore. So and he said, there will be interesting things to do. You should come. And I don't think she was convinced in any way. But she said, if a place is willing to do this, then we should go and see what happens. So I think that's what brought me to Pune. And I think more importantly for me at that point, the fact that there was undergraduate teaching here was an important determining factor. I think I had been at the University of Virginia, which was an undergraduate teaching institution. And I had worked with undergrads. I had taught undergrads at that point as well. And I realized the value of having research happen in an environment where undergraduate students existed. And I think I had done my PhD in a research-only institution. And I think the energy levels were very different. Right? And I think this notion, the opportunity to also influence a generation of, researchers, scientists, thinkers, if you want to call it that, I think was unique in an institution which had undergraduate teaching.
Wonderful.
So this, I think, was a major factor in saying that you should go to a place that does this too, right? And now when I think back, it was the right decision. I think for many reasons. But that's what led me to coming to Pune. At that particular point of time. I think, so we had given ourselves a couple of years to see whether this works, because I mean, you had no clue. You had no clue. Exactly. I think, and you'd lived away long enough for this to be just in your head.
Yes.
That in your head you're thinking this is how it's going to be. But then you come here and it's very different. And then those two things have to be reconciled.
Absolutely.
And, whether that reconciliation happens, I think, is what's going to determine whether you stay.
Absolutely.
So I think in a few months we knew this is going to be okay.
Okay, then.
Right. And I think it was a fantastic decision now when I think about it. In hindsight, I think it happened at the right time. It was a very vibrant ecosystem at that point. And I think to have had a chance to experience that, I think was pretty cool. Especially ICER was just coming up, and I think the chance to see this place develop over those last 10 or 12 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think was quite remarkable.
Yeah. I second that completely. Fantastic. So now that you are in ICER Pune, we'll then shift towards your own research, what you have been doing over the past decade. And there have been very interesting kind of studies from your lab. Maybe you can give us an overview of the directions in which your lab worked. And just give us a gist of what is the kind of research you people have been doing over the last decade or so.
Sure. So I think the lab primarily focuses on cell adhesion, and we study how cells stick to their environment and how that in turn influences their behavior and tells the cells what to do. This microenvironment is interestingly made by cells. So it is, and it's kind of omnipresent. It is there in all our tissues.
Absolutely.
And when we think of an organ or a tissue, I think it is this matrix with the cells. It's not just the cells. So you can effectively get rid of all the cells, and the matrix that remains, will occupy a significant part of the organ or tissue, and that also tells you how much of an impact that could have on how cells work.
This probably also has some connection to the mechano aspect of biology.
Yes, absolutely. I think the matrix is what determines the kind of proteins that come together to make the matrix not only have biochemical properties that make them very unique, which means the composition of matrix in a liver versus a kidney could be very different. The cells that reside in the liver versus the cells in the kidney are adapted in some ways to the matrix that they are living in, which means you move these cells to the kidney cells to the liver matrix and vice versa, they are going to feel the difference.
Absolutely right.
And so and that composition stems from the cells that make that tissue. And that composition is an influencer not just at the level of the biochemical properties, but also the biophysical properties.
Nice.
So the way the matrix is assembled is quite remarkable, that it's a mesh, and it's a mesh that has varying levels of cross-linking, different pore sizes, and it is made by proteins that bind to cells. And so the ability of a cell to recognize a protein obviously triggers a response in it.
Yes.
But the fact that this mesh is put together with a certain composition means that it also has certain biophysical characteristics.
Nice.
So you can take the same composition and put it on two different stiffnesses and generate very different responses.
Wonderful.
And so it's a fairly nuanced regulatory system.
Okay.
And the fact that it exists around cells at all times, and it also talks to cells at pretty much all times, says that it influences almost everything that the cell does.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
And so understanding how this matrix regulates cellular signaling or, processes like trafficking, processes like we now study how they affect cellular organelles, all become relevant because, we are trying to understand how, this environment affects the
cells. Okay, nice.
And the second aspect to what we study stems from the fact that in many disease conditions, so this environment strongly regulates the cell. And if the cell has to, cells have change their ability to respond to this control by the matrix is integral to, them, causing diseases.
Diseases, yes.
So diseases like cancer particularly, cells have this ability, which is called anchorage independence, which means they, unlike normal cells that need to be adherent to grow, these cells don't have that fine a requirement to be adherent. So
Nice.
they can grow in ways that a normal cell will not be able to grow. They can grow in environments that a normal cell will not be able to grow. And this stems from the fact that the way this cell talks to its matrix environment is very different from a normal cell.
Normal cell. Nice.
And understanding how normal cells are regulated, the hope is that we can then ask, what happens in diseases like cancer? How are these cancer cells responding differently to the matrix than a normal cell does? And if you understand both these aspects, the hope here is once you know mechanisms, pathways that do this in normal cells, and you know how those pathways are altered in cancer cells, can we find ways to target those changes?
Okay.
And make the cancer cells more anchorage dependent. Right? And this then obviously can influence the ability, our ability to target those cancers, maybe make existing drugs that much more effective because, you're adding this additional element to it, which is now you are challenging the ability of these cells to grow in an anchorage independent manner. Yeah. So that's the kind of big picture perspective of what we are trying to do.
Wonderful. So there is a kind of multidisciplinarity also required to address questions what you're now interested in, right?
Right.
Which means you may also be using extensively imaging and other kind of techniques.
Yes. So I mean, a lot of cell biology now is kind of bound to imaging and I think a lot of cellular imaging obviously plays a role. I think we also, I think a lot of biology now feeds into very interesting overlaps with other disciplines.
Absolutely.
As you said, the fact that there is mechanics at the level of tissues I think means, there are elements of how networks of matrices are put together, how they are modified, organized, what does that mean, and how do you, can you create models for how the matrix is assembled and things like that, right? So we obviously are working with other labs to ask questions such as that.
Absolutely.
We are looking at processes like endocytosis, of how things are carried into the cell, and how they are taken back out, and modeling pathways or processes like endocytosis, asking how cellular organelles like the Golgi could influence this, requires us to not just do experiments to test how these processes are regulated, but then we also work with labs that try to model, these changes that are happening and see if they can predict what exactly, is causing the changes that we are seeing.
Okay.
And then suggest if this were true, then I predict that will happen. And then come back to us and say, now can you test that? Right?
Nice.
And see if that model holds, right? We similarly work with labs like, Madhusudan's lab, which looks at, crystal structures and organization of proteins and how they sit and work together. So what we cannot do at the cellular level can we kind of put together based on structure. Of existing known structures for proteins and ask whether they can, how they talk to each other or how they regulate each other.
Wonderful.
And finally, this idea that we are working with normal cells, trying to understand things and ask how they change in cancer cells. I mentioned the idea that can we target the changes that have happened. So we're also working with labs in chemistry, Jai Kannan's lab, to try and ask, is there a way to deliver a drug that we are interested in to target a molecule or a pathway in cancer cells very specifically.
Nice.
And is there a way for us to maybe repurpose a drug that otherwise is not being used because of issues like solubility and develop a drug delivery system that will now make it possible to use such a drug.
Wonderful.
Right? So all these are kind of connected to that core question, but I don't think any biology research is in today's world can stand just on
Absolutely. This looking at a problem from multiple viewpoints is one of the most important aspects of doing
it. Also
research.
adds so much more to what you discover and learn
absolutely.
In ways that otherwise would not be possible.
Absolutely.
So it really takes what we are trying to do as a primary question significantly ahead because we are able to do this.
Yes. That is fabulous, Nagaraj. It's very, very interesting. And I also know that you direct a lab which has many good students. And how big is your group?
So I think we are 10 plus at this point. I think about 12 people with undergrad students and all.
Nice.
Right? Yeah. So I think that is the most interesting and challenging part of doing research as an independent researcher.
Absolutely.
Is getting a bunch of people excited and motivated. To do, to ask challenging questions and be inspired to do this.
Absolutely. See, one element which I have seen, especially in your presentations, in even conversations which we had, and also the various different platforms on which you are, Twitter, or even if one sees your lab webpage, there is a strong element of aesthetics. That is something which I really appreciate in kind of looking at your work. Where did you get the inspiration or influence, so to speak?
No, I think design is something that really inspires me in many ways. I find that very. I think the thought that you could make something functional.
Yes.
Keeping a certain aesthetic, right? I think is a brilliant thought.
So, absolutely. Maybe there is an evolutionary reason too, probably.
So I think if I had not done this, I would have probably done something in design at some point, because I find it very satisfying, and it's also not something that is. I think it's fairly intuitive.
Yeah.
It's not something that takes a lot of effort. And I really admire people who have the ability to, as I said, take something simple but make it elegant.
Absolutely.
Right? And there is significant merit to this. And I think so when you design something or you make a presentation or a slide. Like this year, I taught a portion of a course on how to make a presentation.
Yes,
and a good good aspect of that was focused on how to structure something, right? What exactly are the elements of that, and why does it matter? I think inherently we have we connect to this, is my sense.
Absolutely.
In maybe ways that we don't completely understand.
So true.
Yeah. So that, I think, then becomes something you have to learn to use.
True.
Right? So if you're able to create an impression, of course, the content matters. It's not like content doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
But if it takes the content further, then
surely
learning,
there is
clearly that's an advantage. And a lot of what we do, I've realized, is dependent on communicating content clearly. Right?
Yes.
And so whether it be a talk, whether it be a conversation, whether it be a grant you're writing, I think you're inherently trying to do this.
Absolutely right. Clarity is
and so if there are little things you can do to improve clarity, they could go a long way. And I think sometimes the difference between getting funded and not funded is, I think, very small.
Margins are very small.
Margins are very small.
So if you look at also the aspects in science, generally speaking, that is an important part of how one presents the work, which has as kind of bearing as much as the content itself many a times.
Yeah.
So this kind of branches us towards slightly more broader aspect of doing science, especially in India, and also looking at the whole world as through the lens of scientists, so to speak. You are also somebody who deeply thinks about the way science is done generally, and especially in India, be it in the context of gender, be it in the context of students, their support system. What are your thoughts, Nagaraj? How and where are we in doing research, and what are things which we can really take forward to make India a better research ecosystem?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's being said now about this, right? I think there are I don't think research exists in independent of our social environment.
Absolutely.
I think, I was telling you how joining microbiology when I did, I don't think there was, I did not know whether this is going to be a career. Right? Like how much money are you going to make, I mean, my parents were okay with, obviously, you picking something that you were excited to do. But as I said, I think, even today's time, most parents will be. Right?
Absolutely.
But I think the way society perceives what is important, I think has changed in our lifetimes. I think, so if you were doing something in the sciences in the 1990s, 90s, I think it was considered a very cool thing to do. I don't think people were trying to ask you, but how much money are you going to make?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever got asked that.
Same here.
Right? Forget my parents, but I don't think I got asked this outside either.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you realize that, okay, this is something interesting. It's not for everybody to do. So there was a sense that, okay, if somebody is trying to do something like this, we have to try and at least encourage them to do this, because this is not everybody's cup of tea.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think that has changed this sense of what we see as important. I think has changed over a period of time. And this is very visible in, I think, the generation of students. In schools or colleges who are now coming to be, or pick professions and choose courses and things like that. I have a very good friend who did her undergrad with me and, teaches in a college in Bombay, and I have known and has been a teacher for 20 plus years.
Wow. Okay.
And she was saying how, a course like microbiology that, she teaches, would have students who were aspiring to do a degree in microbiology would have 75-80% marks. They may have just missed getting into, medicine or dentistry, as the case may be, and were aspiring to study microbiology.
Okay.
Right? And that's changed very distinctly in terms of how, what 75-80% scoring students are wanting to do today.
Yeah.
So she said,
that actually is a large number.
Yeah, it's a large number.
We don't pay attention to that part of the.
This is not the medical seat. People, this is just below that, and they were kind of inclined to choose the sciences, just as they were inclined to go to, a BCom or a BA, as the case may be. I think that inclination has shifted distinctly. And she's been saying this for many years now. Like whenever I meet her and, she's, for the last maybe 7-8 years, she's been saying this. That this has changed. And I think, how much we are. So this now is reflected in maybe PhD students who we are getting.
Absolutely.
And how many students want to do a PhD. And why, so to speak, right? So how do you, address this? Or is there really a way to make the sciences interesting, right? Or exciting place to be in? I think there are many little things that we can do. I think some at the level of policy, maybe government, in terms of, how attractive funding and research opportunities are in institutions. Obviously, that requires support from the government to be able to think that, it's worth supporting institutions to do this.
Wonderful.
I think there are interesting programs. I think things like the PMRF fellowship was started, and to try and encourage students to aspire for something more than what they would. I think this question of us making sure that students get good fellowships when they are doing a PhD, it's a significant amount of time.
Absolutely.
I think, as I said, when I was doing my PhD, I don't think the world outside made me feel like I didn't make enough money. I think now the world outside does make you feel like you don't make enough money.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, this is 5 years of your life that you're investing in. We have to see this as being relevant and so that, we support students in the right way.
Absolutely.
I think now the challenges have been, money coming on time and such like that, and things like that. And those little things can clearly be addressed.
Right? Absolutely.
I think we have to make it so that this seems like an equally important thing to do for us as a country, as an institution. So there is a certain pride in thinking, that you are working in an institution like an ICER or another place, and trying to do something that not many people will be able to or can aspire to do.
Wonderful.
Right?
Wonderful.
So I think there is still a lot of respect in larger communities for people who are in the sciences, people who are teachers, and I say this particularly because it's not just the sciences. I think, yes, we are in the sciences, so we tend to think about it a bit more.
Absolutely.
But teachers, for example,
Exactly.
I think it's a very respected profession. Even today, people respect the fact that you're a teacher, and I think we have to value
that.
These professions.
Totally.
And think that our entire society stands on the shoulders of
the. See, if you even go back to the origins of this episode, you could see the influence of the teachers was so much, right?
No, I genuinely think that is so vital for us to invest in as a country, and see programs that are set up that support teachers, make sure that they have the opportunity to devote. Most teachers, I mean, I speak to many of them as part of many of the programs that ISER conducts, iRise and others. And teachers are extremely enthusiastic. They are clearly excited to do. They have chosen this as a profession with intent. And it's so obvious when they come to a place like this. They are curious, they are excited. They are motivated, and we have to support them.
Absolutely.
And make it clear that what you do is really important for us, as a civilization or as a country.
Absolutely.
So I think these are challenges that are not just India's. I think these are across the world as well.
Absolutely.
And so it's not like saying only we need to think about it. I think as a as a global thing, we need to see value in investing in some of this.
So Nagaraj, you also do a lot of outreach activities, including Praram, which is a very interesting initiative. And you also are involved in various different kind of groups like Exciting Science Group and other things. You have invested quite a lot of time in doing all these things. So what motivates you to do all things?
I think this is integral to what I do.
Exactly.
I don't think this is additional in any way.
Absolutely right.
I think just as I enjoy waking up and going to the lab in the morning, I think the opportunity to go talk to people about what you do and maybe communicate in some ways why you're excited about getting a chance to do this, right? Like what exactly motivates you to ask the questions that you do, why you think this is relevant, I think is part of what we are trying to do.
Absolutely right.
So if you're doing science, I'm thinking, yes, the work and raising funds to get a chance to do the research that you're doing is obviously a very major part of what we do. But this is all part of that, if you ask me. Like I mean, so I don't see this as very distinctly different. I think it's integral
to the work what we do. No, I agree. In fact, I take podcasting also and blogging as seriously as the other parts of my research, because that is something which is a great feedback for you to also sustain your interest. And
I think it also makes science and scientists more accessible.
Absolutely.
I think I remember what it felt like walking into TIFR for the first time, and now, even though I've been there many times, and
you feel the same.
I think I still walk in and I remember what that felt like.
Like
it's like you could have cut the tension with a knife, and the question is why? I don't feel like that walking into other places, right? But why do I feel like that walking into a research institute or an institution like this? I mean, over a period of time, it's gotten better. It's not like I think so now you've gone there many times and you know people, and so it doesn't feel the same way. But I will never forget what that felt like the first time.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And that in some ways has to do with the fact that this seemed like a place that is otherwise completely inaccessible.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is like a group of people who are doing something very extraordinary. They are exceptionally bright or so, and there is no way you belong there.
Yeah.
Right? And this is
it's a barrier.
It's very easy for that kind of impression to be there.
Absolutely.
Right? And today's time, I think it doesn't matter that you don't aspire to be a researcher in an ICER or a TIFR or a NCBS or any other place, right? But can you ask a researcher a question that you have?
Yeah.
And will you do this?
Yes.
Like, I think in our times, I don't think, like you would think 15 times before asking somebody, because one, you're thinking, what if it's like, sounds like a really stupid thing, right?
True.
And also because they seem like, so difficult to reach, that it'll be a miracle if they even read what I wrote.
Yeah. Right? That's the level up to which it is actually kind of.
So I think a lot of this outreach, to some extent, breaks that down.
Absolutely.
Right?
Perception.
And I think it's important that I find it. I may not agree with what you're asking or saying, but the fact that you're able to ask. Me this question, I think I see as a very empowering thing at both ends, for people at large, but also for us as scientists, for this community.
Fabulous. So, you are also a person who has taken very important initiative in creating a rhythm in ICER Pune through Speak Meche. That is one thing which all of us really, are thankful to you. And how did that happen, Nagaraj? Tell us.
I think there is the National Endowment of the Arts in the US has a tagline, which is called "A great nation deserves great art."
Art, absolutely.
Right? And the first time I read about this, I thought this is such a remarkable thought.
Absolutely.
Right? That and I think educational institutions have this responsibility, not just towards our students, but the larger community around us.
Absolutely right.
That we also act as centers that support the arts, right? And I think we are a great space for this.
Absolutely.
And we also, I think, the opportunity to engage with art and artists, I think, has deep impacts on you.
Absolutely.
Right? I think,
in fact, one cannot really kind of think about an ecosystem without this input. Especially when you are doing research. And it has really had a very positive impact on the local ecosystem, and to a large extent even kind of associated ecosystems in and around Pune.
I think so. I was involved with music very early on. I never learned music, but I've always listened to music at home, and I think my parents took us to all the concerts that they could go to or they could afford to go to. And I think as an undergraduate in Bombay, I remember being actively going to concerts that this Indian music group that's based out of St. Xavier's, used to host. And they have... interestingly, they host all these concerts in Xavier's, and all concerts are recorded, and they have a really nice, small but very nice music room where you can go and listen to any concert that was recorded at an IMG event.
Nice.
They complete 30 years this year, if I remember correctly, for the last 30 years, right? And I think, we used to go attend anything that they held. All the concerts were free for the most part. I think there was one annual concert that they used to have, which was ticketed. It wasn't very expensive. And they used to have a concert that used to run through the night on the 25th of January.
Okay.
This concert begins at 9 o'clock and runs till 6 a.m. on the 26th of Jan.
Yeah, it's like the Chennai conference kind of thing.
Right?
Also,
and this used to happen. I don't think it happens anymore because of permission to, have a concert overnight and things like that. But I had such wonderful memories of this. And the thing is that I don't think we could afford tickets to go sit in seats. There used to be...
the Jamkhana.
Absolutely, right. But it is amazing, the kind of people who were willing to come and sit and listen to an overnight concert, sitting there. I remember once sitting next to Anil Darkar and Ayesha Darkar, who sat through the whole night with everybody else listening to this, right?
Wow.
And you got to hear really remarkable musicians. So I think just that opportunity to get to interact or see these people perform, and then the memories that come with it. Right? There are very distinct, like I can close my eyes and remember what early morning, the breaking of dawn feels like, when Shiv Kumar Sharma is playing, a Bhupali in the morning, right? And this is, I think if you experience it, it doesn't go away.
Absolutely. It's irreversible.
Yeah, it's like, so then it's like a drug. You want to come back next time because this is possible.
Yeah.
And this has been, so that opportunity to do that at that particular point of time meant this music went with you wherever you went. I think I moved to the University of Virginia, and Virginia had a small, SPICMAC chapter. And in the time that we were there, we really, created opportunities to bring artists. We wrote for grants. It was challenging to raise money, right? All this was a interesting experience to do. Like there were organizations within the university that you could write for grants. You had to justify how many people were coming, what is the impact this is going to have, why is it important for the diversity on campus, and we got funded. And so, we raised a few $1,000s every year, which allowed us to invite, many interesting artists, and, and the impact of this, is very striking. I have a very, remarkable anecdote, which is, Martin, who I did my postdoc with, knew I was involved with SPICMAC, and I kept telling him he should come to listen to one of these concerts. And Vishwamohan Bhatt was coming to perform. And he's a Grammy-winning musician. He's a Padma Bhushan, if I remember correctly. And he came and spent 2 days with us, stayed with us. And it was just a remarkable opportunity. Like at some point of time, having coffee in a small cafe, you're suddenly realizing, oh my God, this is like we're having this conversation about life and music with one of these extraordinary people, right?
Absolutely.
So I tried convincing Martin, saying that you have to come to this concert. I said, he's really exceptionally talented, and it'll be an interesting experience. Just come.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, I'll come. And we by that time had become reasonably good at promoting these events. The local radio station where we went and spoke about, we would go and talk about the music and introduce the music and things like that. So I think a lot of people who were non-Indian were coming to these concerts, right?
Very nice.
So I remember this auditorium was packed on that day, right? There were like 450 people maybe in the auditorium. And Vishwamohan Bhatt came, and I don't think he was expecting so many
Such a
people
big,
there. Yeah.
audience.
Like, this is a small university town in the middle of Virginia. You know, where are you thinking? You know, there'll be 30 people in the auditorium. So I think he was really taken aback.
Oh, okay.
And then he sat down to play something. And, you know, before the concert, he said, I'll play something for 40 minutes and then, you know, we'll have a break and then I'll play something else. And before he started the concert, I asked him, I said, is it okay if we record this? And he said, nahi, theek hai, rehne dijiye, you know, it's not really needed. So I said, okay, that's okay. If you don't want to get it recorded, you know. So, and then he came and sat in front of this audience and he played this opening piece, which ran an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing.
It was amazing. And I've heard him before. And it blew my socks off what he did on that day. And some of it had to do later on. He did mention, he said, you know, I was so overwhelmed by the fact that there were 450 people that this just came out in what I played. Wow. Right? That I just played what I felt. This is what he said.
That's the highest form of artistry.
Right? And I remember, so Martin came to this concert. Luckily, he was there on that day. And before the concert, he asked me, he said, so how should I listen to this music? And I know he's interested in Western classical music and, you know, he listens to that. I said, see, there is no way to listen to Indian classical music. I said, let the music take you where it takes you. Yeah. It's kind of meditative in that sense. Yeah. So you have to let the music take you where it goes, right? And so then he played this piece for an hour and 10 minutes. Wow. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this cannot be a better introduction to Indian classical music. So at the interval, at the break, I remember I go find Martin and I say, so what did you think? You know? And he said something that I think, you know, really for me signifies the impact music can have across cultures, across people. You know, Martin said, it was singularly one of those remarkable music experiences. And he said, halfway through his performance, as I'm closing my eyes and listening, he said, I had this deep urge that I should go to India. Wow.
Amazing.
And I mean, I didn't know what to say, right? I said, wow, that is remarkable, right? That this could be the emotion that it evokes.
Wow. That's amazing.
Right? And it also effectively told me the impact this music can have.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what are the odds that, you know, you would be able to bring an artist of this caliber to a small university town and there is somebody there sitting, listening to this music for the first time and feels connected in a way that you don't know is possible.
Fabulous.
Right? And I think I moved back. This was in 2009, if I remember. And 2010, I moved back. And I think a year after that, Martin came for a meeting in Bombay, in ISER. And he came, I mean, we took him around Bombay and he traveled across India, went to southern India and the Taj and all these places. And I know he still goes to Indian concerts that happen in Yale.
Wow.
Right? Now, see, this is the amazing thing. And this is the kind of impact this could create.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think if we have the opportunity to do this, I think we have to do this for as many people as possible.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of students come to ISER from very different backgrounds. I think many of them have, you know, I think if I could go to IMG and listen, I think there was a certain amount of privilege associated with that, the fact that I could. I think for a lot of our students, it's not possible.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean they will not connect to Indian classical music or it will not stay with them, right? And I think this is the opportunity for us to at least give them a chance to experience I think what Spikmake really does well is that, you know, artists are willing to support a movement like that. So we are able to get some of the best you know, artists in the country. And
amazing.
And that ensures that you can have evenings like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Where something so magical happens that, you know, now this stays with you for the rest of your life. And many of our students, you know, have kind of experienced this, right? Absolutely. You know, I've had students, so there is interestingly a student from ICER who was an undergraduate student here, who was a volunteer for Spikmake, who is now part of that Spikmake chapter at University of Virginia. That I ran, right? Rachna Bhave, her name is. Rachna is now there. Okay. And so when I get emails from UVA, I see her on those pictures, right? And I'm thinking, this is so cool.
So cool, right? It's like all kind of, you know, connecting back in that sense.
Yeah, so I think, you know, and there are students who've written, I know somebody who's now, after their MBA, doing, you know, working in London. And I get this the student who worked in my lab for some time. And I got this very brief email very suddenly from them, which said that I was sitting this morning with a cup of coffee and listening to this piece by Kishori Amalkar. And I thought this would not have happened but for the chance to listen to this kind of music when I was in ICER. Wow. That's all they had to say. And this is remarkable, I think. Right? So I think it's a lot of work to put these events together. Yeah. I think obviously students are involved and they are the ones who are doing most of the work. But I think I'm also very glad that places like ICER have very actively supported.
Exactly.
I think without that it's not possible. Right? And
absolutely.
So many people have come to ICER for the first time to listen to a concert and then have been curious about what we do, and you know, and this conversation has gone other places, right? And so I think so there are many we are part of this community,
exactly.
I think if we can give back to the community in this way, I think it's fantastic.
That's quite remarkable in that sense. Yeah. So now we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about language, and very briefly we'll do this, where generally I ask my guests to just spend a couple of minutes explaining what their motivations and research is about in their mother tongue. And I would also want you to recite a poetry, which I know you do. So I would then have two tasks for you. So please explain.
So my mother tongue is Tamil.
Yes.
And my Tamil is very bad, right? Because I grew up in Bombay, and of course I speak Tamil at home, but it is. Yeah, I think, you know, it's not going to sound right, and I sadly I haven't learned to write Tamil, but I can speak.
Yeah, please. No, it is to be as informal as possible.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think. I've never actually talked about anything related to science in Tamil, right? And so this is interesting. You know, thought on what is it that I should say. So I think you said the motivation for doing science, or the motivation for kind of pursuing a career in science. So, oh God, this is hard to do.
No, but
this is hard to do.
It's something you can just do.
So science la career யோசிக்கிறபோது I think main reason பார்க்க போச்சுன்னா I think interest ஒரு curiosity இருக்கணும். science-ல இல்லை curiosity in general இருக்கணும். How things work, எப்படி why do certain things happen certain way. நம்ம இதை பற்றி யோசிக்கிற போது தான் நம்மளுக்கு தெரியறத நம்மளுக்கு எத்தனை தெரியும் எத்தனை தெரியாது. அண்ட் அந்த கியூரியாசிட்டி தான் ஐ திங்க் ஒரு சின்ன ஸ்டூடெண்ட்டாக இருக்கிற போதுலேருந்து ஐ திங்க் மெயின் காரணம் இந்த ரிசர்ச்சில் இது வரைக்கும் வந்தது. So I think that is my short attempt at doing this.
Wonderful.
I think it is. No, I realize that I have conversations, at home that I can have in Tamil, but I think being able to speak something like which is remotely technical, right? I think is not something.
Yeah.
Like I can probably do this in Marathi. Better because I speak Marathi and I can talk reasonably.
I've heard you speak Marathi.
So I think, but I think this is one more thing that we have to be able to learn to do. That I think we have to be able to communicate the science that we do in languages that actually resonate with students. I mean, English is just one medium. Yeah, absolutely.
No, but now I'm also very interested in hearing you recite a poetry.
Okay, I'm going to recite something that is a poem that I learned or read I think somewhere when I was doing my undergrad. And this is a poem by Harivansh Rai Bachchan.
Oh, okay.
Right? And as I said, this interest in poetry or Hindi poetry in particular, I think has stayed, largely because of this teacher who taught Hindi at a certain point of time and just made it interesting, to engage with. So this poem is called, I think it is from Madhushala. And Madhushala is a very interesting book that maybe a lot of people don't engage with anymore. It was written in the 1930s. It was written in 1932, if I remember correctly. And Harivansh Rai ji was a PhD in English literature.
Yes. Yeah.
And was writing in Hindi. And it's a remarkable book. So there are 3 books: Madhushala, Madhubala, right? Which is a trilogy. And this poem is called Is Par Us Par. Okay. इस पार प्रिय मधु है तुम हो, उस पार न जाने क्या होगा, आज चला मैं कल आओगी तुम, परसों सब संगी साथी, जिसको जाना है जाता है, जग रोती धोती रह जाती, दिल तो मेरा होता डगमग तट पर के ही हलकारों से, जब मैं एकांकी पहुंचूंगा मझधार न जाने क्या होगा, इस पार प्रिय मधु है तुम हो, उस पार न जाने क्या होगा.
Wow. Amazing. Superb.
I think this is a poem that stayed. It's one of those things that I still remember every once in a while.
No, this is quite remarkable, Nagaraj. Yeah. This is, it's also something you can see. Even you also spoke about the music, the poetry. The art has such a deep human element, right? That's something which is
I think it also enriches us in many different ways. And I think that is why the need to engage with art in some form or the other, I think throughout your life, it's not just something you do when you're a kid and you're forced to take music lessons. I think it stays with you, and then I think at some point you have to do it very consciously. I think I wanted to make sure that I have friends who are artists, and and this is something that I go look for, right? And so the intent is that I think they make not just my life better, but I think they make me a better person too.
Absolutely.
So I think for that reasons you want this in your life.
In effect. Absolutely.
And I think that's the hope that I think, students, I keep pushing, saying, Pune is culturally a very vibrant city
place,
to be
absolutely.
in. So the fact that you're here says you have to go every week. There is something happening, right?
Absolutely.
And I get a chance to go listen to small concerts at in Baithaks and things like that, and I think it's such a privilege to get to do this. And almost everything I have heard that has been exceptional has been free.
Yeah. See, that's something
I always think that I don't think I have such wonderful memories of remarkable concerts which have all largely been
open source.
Open source, as you said.
Fantastic. So now we are almost concluding the episode. Before that, I would want you to just tell us a little bit about your future directions, what projects you are working on, both in terms of research and something beyond the research.
No, I think so. A lot of what we are trying to do still will focus on these primary questions that we've started working on. I mean, we've obviously started doing new things in terms of how we approach cell matrix addition and what kind of how we study it and what kind of aspects of cellular behavior we study. I think a lot of emphasis in the last few years has been on looking at cellular organelles, and we are now really thinking very deeply about this in terms of both cells which are normal and also diseases. And this is something that the general community now is also realizing is the case. So that is one thing that I think we will focus on going forward. I think being able to create more interdisciplinary approaches is what I am really excited to be thinking about. Right? I think this has also meant you have to learn new things or at least new ways of thinking. But the opportunity that now exists, and there are very interesting people collaborating, and so that is something that I want the lab to also think about, right? And not just at the level of the me as the PI in the lab, but I think for students to actively venture into thinking, how do I make this project multidisciplinary? Can we inculcate that in how we approach problems? Because I think that's also important. It's not just about how I think about this, but how are you able to kind of transfer this thought process to other students as well. So that is one important thing I think going forward for us to try and do. I think outreach in terms of science in a way that allows scientists to be accessible, I think is something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I also think we have to find ways to do, not just as institutions, but as a community at large.
Absolutely right.
And there are many interesting avenues to do this. I think finding a mechanism or a method to do this. See, bigger cities, access is still very high, right? Pune
You're
is reasonable. You know, most students have a way to kind of connect and so on and so forth, right? But I think, how do you take this to smaller towns in India or villages in the country? It's not like there aren't students there who are curious to know.
Right. Absolutely.
I think this is something that I've been thinking about in terms of. So one thought here is to have a kind of a residency program, right? Where and this has to be defined in some way, and there are certain thoughts on how to define it. You know, what places to pick, you know, what organizations to maybe work with. But what if a scientist goes and spends a week right, in a school?
Very nice.
Right?
Very nice.
And see, the thing is, we go for a few hours, and obviously there is merit to that. I'm not saying there isn't. But, you know, imagine what kind of opportunities to interact, converse, just know a scientist for a week could mean, right? So you could go teach, you know, obviously for that period of time. But what if you also, you know, hung out there, right? And students got a chance to spend time with you, you know, talk about what you do otherwise, you know, what are your interests.
Literally humanizing them.
Yeah, right? It's like, you know, and I don't think there is a program that does this.
You're right. You're right.
And the idea is, and I think there are enough scientists who might be willing to participate in this, right? And so the idea is to create a structure or a mechanism that will allow schools to, say, maybe nominate themselves, saying we are interested, we will host somebody for this period of time, right? Now, the inspiration for this also comes from SPICMACE, because SPICMACE does these
this exactly the same thing,
right? Where they take artists to really small towns and places, and you know, they are you know, performing with very minimal resources, but the impact of that is very real.
Absolutely.
Right? So why can't we do this with scientists, right? So this is kind of, I haven't spoken about this before. I'm talking about
I'm very glad.
The first time.
It's because, fabulous that I also kind of, you know, I'm very glad that,
so this is so this has been on my mind for some time, and there have been some you know, brainstorming on how to do this, how to make this effective, you know, how do you pick colleges or institutions that want to host somebody, you know, what is it going to cost logistically, how do you manage this, how much money will something like this need to run, can people volunteer, you know, obviously they're volunteering time to do this, you know, so it needs a setup or a structure to do this, but I think the impact of somebody going and spending a certain amount of time, I think also where you are kind of disconnected with everything else. And your attention is focused on that school or the kids in that school.
Yes.
I think will make it effective.
Fabulous.
Now the thing is, developing a structure is important for this. You know, just putting the scientist there is not.
So it takes some kind of background work.
So how do you, you know, can we identify a teacher who will lead this at that institution and they be the liaison, you know, for this faculty? We'll arrange this together, but there is a structure that they are aware of to do this, you know, such that the person has a chance to go interact with as many people as they are there. And then, of course, to figure whether this will work. Like, does it actually have an impact as we are thinking? Right?
Wonderful.
Yeah. So this is kind of one of the things to work on in the coming years.
Fabulous, Nagaraj. This is something, you know, I'm privileged to actually listen to all these things, and it's also an inspiration. You know, it's something which we all aspire to actually do, and it also has enriched the way one thinks about science, and that is a very important thing. So I thank you very much for the time you have actually spent.
My pleasure. Thanks for doing this. I mean, I think, I always think time is the biggest currency we have.
Yeah.
I think if you have time, you could do so many things with it.
Exactly.
And for you to choose to do this, is a choice.
This is a choice, exactly.
So thanks for making that choice.
As I mentioned, I've been inspired by the ecosystem, and you are a very important part of that ecosystem. So it's my privilege. Thank you very much. You. And I'll also be posting all the references in the show notes, including some of the things what Nagaraj mentioned about. Do check all those things, because you get an in-depth kind of overview of that. So this is Pratidhwani, where we try to humanize science.